Yet another trade deadline has come and gone, which means we have a lot to talk about today. Consider this, obviously I don't know how long the video is going to be at this point. Consider this a mini podcast, though, I'm sure, based off of the length of this. A lot of different ways I could cover the deadline, but you know what? Decided the best way to handle this is to use cap-friendly. Reminder, unless you're recording a video like this and you don't want cheap ads playing, no disrespect to cap-friendly, probably not cheap ads, but what I'm saying is, make sure to have cap-friendly whitelisted. Tremendous website. Love them. Beautiful. One of my favorite sites on the internet, of course, and such a incredible tool. So support them, unlike this incredible tool. Okay? Okay. So yeah, the deadline. First and foremost, thank you to those of you that joined me live on Wednesday morning into the afternoon as we followed along with the day. It was very clear at around, say, 3:30 p.m. Eastern that it was going to take a while for a lot of the news to come out as far as some of these final deals, like the Joel Persson, Angus Redmond trade, as minor as it might be, broke much later, especially like the Leafs' involvement in the Leonard trade. So yeah, it was a very interesting day, but a fun day nonetheless. So like I said, I think my game plan here is to just treat this as a, hey, let's rant and ramble kind of deal. Let's talk about every team, what they did, what they didn't do, what they could have done. So we're going to start off by talking about the Anaheim Ducks, who actually did quite a bit, including quite a few minor trades. And I do want to start off, of course, with the Andre Kasha trade. Again, I had a video up talking about the thing at length, the deal at length, and what it meant for both teams. But quickly, just to summarize that video, if you want, to hear me go a little bit more in depth about that, you can check out that individual video. But a good deal for both teams. Again, Andre Kasha, if he can stay healthy, he's going to fit in wonderfully in the Bruins' top six. Matter of fact, the Bruins play the Calgary Flames tonight. He will not be in the lineup. However, somebody else, a new acquisition for the Bruins, will be. But again, for Anaheim, you get a defensive prospect that you desperately needed in the first-round pick. You take on David Backes, not a big deal. All in all, a good trade. Derek Grant, honestly, I'm surprised the return was as low as it was. I think this is a really good deal for the Philadelphia Flyers. No disrespect to Kyle Criscuolo, but he is a career minor leaguer. It's a fourth-round pick regardless, but, Derek Grant, 20 points in 49 games. You ask any Ducks fan, and they are very, very upset that he is gone, and perhaps rightfully so. So for Anaheim, you get something for someone you might not have held on to. A fourth-round pick, it helps. We'll talk about the Ducks' kind of war chest that they've built up here really quickly, actually. But, perhaps not much of a war chest. But, that Bruins first-rounder, they didn't have their own fourth-rounder. Good prospects already in the system. It makes sense, of course, to retool and rebuild a little bit. But, yeah, for Philly, good deal all in all. For Anaheim, Danton Heinen and Nick Ritchie. I was stunned when this trade broke. Couldn't believe it, because in the aftermath of the Kasha deal and the morning of the deadline with the lines that were available at practice, Danton Heinen was the odd one out. So we were talking earlier in the day during that deadline stream of what does this mean for Danton Heinen? Obviously, it seemed like his time was done, but hopefully the Bruins hold on to him, and he's an excellent 13th forward to have if that's how they're going to use him. Instead, he gets traded within the hour, 1-for-1 for Nick Ritchie. Now, for the Ducks, Danton Heinen was one of the most polarizing players on the Bruins. Literally, there was no middle ground. You loved him or hated him. I was more on the side of loving him. Again, not everything about his game, but he wasn't the worst player to ever see the ice in a Bruins uniform, like a lot of people think that he happened to be. The bottom line is, for both teams, a change in, for both players really, a change in scenery is probably a good thing. Again, Danton Heinen's time in Boston, it was probably coming to an end anyway. Both guys are signed through next year. Heinen's a little bit cheaper or a little bit more expensive, so it makes sense for the Bruins, from their standpoint, to shed a little bit of cap, especially when they still have to worry about re-signing Torrey Krug. Heinen, in terms of the two-way game, he's not overly physical. Nick Ritchie is overly physical. I believe he averages the most hits per 60 in the NHL. It takes a lot of penalties as a result. His expected goals for are extremely high. I think they might even be first in the NHL. He just doesn't convert on a lot of those chances. So in terms of the stereotypical Bruins style, which really hasn't been their style for almost a decade now, but in terms of that style, he fits the bill, and he'll actually be playing tonight for the Bruins against the Calgary Flames. He'll be on the third line next to Anders Bjork and Charlie Coyle. So very excited to see what he can do in his first game. But like I said, I think for both teams, just a change of scene, or for both players, for both teams, change of scenery made sense. And, we'll see what can happen. Again, I think Danton Heinen will fit in well with the Ducks. Nick Ritchie, he's going to be a bottom six option, former first-round pick. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from him. It's going to be interesting to see if he's on the fourth line once, Andre Kosh is good to go, or if they decide to keep Ritchie there full-time instead of running with Carson Kuhlman, because Kuhlman, next to Bjork and Coyle, was working very well. Like, that line has been on a really good run of form lately. So, a lot of unanswered questions. For now, an even trade. I don't think you can list it any other way. This one was shocking because this broke well after 3:30 p.m. Eastern yesterday. Again, the deadline was at 3. Christian Djoos, 1-for-1 for Daniel Sprong. Now, Daniel Sprong is an interesting one where, the bottom line is, I think if you look at it, the deal with Pittsburgh, Marcus Pettersson going to the Pens for Daniel Sprong, Pittsburgh looked like they were getting the better of that trade. Pettersson's fit in very well on that team, gets a handsome new contract as a result, and yet here we have Daniel Sprong being dealt for Christian Djoos. I'm a little bit surprised, but, a little bit of extra forward depth of the cap's probably not a bad thing. Daniel Sprong's been an interesting player where, point production hasn't been that bad. If I'm not mistaken, there have been questions over the skating and obviously the defensive ability. But, last year, 19 points in 47 games with the Ducks. That's not that bad, obviously. But he never got a shot in the NHL lineup this year. So, what the future, brings for him, I don't know. For the Ducks, like I talked about with the Axel Anderson pickup, a little bit of extra help defensively, a little bit of extra depth, not a bad thing. So, I like this deal for them. Again, Sprong was in the mix, but was he behind guys like Sam Steele and Comtois, centers, and he's a winger, I know, but on the pecking order of forward depth, where was Daniel Sprong? Probably not in the top 3, maybe top 5, maybe outside of it. It makes sense for Anaheim to go and get another defenseman. So, for that particular deal, I do like it for both sides. Whether or not Sprong is able to find any consistency at the NHL level with Washington, I don't know. But Anaheim gets another younger defenseman that they can certainly work with. And obviously, Christian Djoos has more NHL experience. He's 25. He's not Axel Anderson, who's still playing in junior. But again, Christian Djoos, no opportunity at the NHL level this year after playing 45 games last year. You look at Washington, of course, they've gone out and, picked up Brendan Dillon. So Djoos was just never going to play. So, decent enough deal. A minor deal here, Matt Irwin and a 6 for Corbinian Holzer. Irwin and Holzer, are like they're 6th, 7th guys, maybe even 8th guys, really, when you look at it. For Anaheim, you get a 6th round pick out of it. You could make the argument whether or not, Irwin's more of a 7th and Holzer's more of a 6th. It's just a minor trade, swapping defensemen. Anaheim, I think, does well, though, because, again, you pick up another random draft pick. Similar to the Nick Ritchie, Danton Heinen trade. Yes, Anaheim did a lot. Sonny Milano for Devin Shore, 1-for-1. Now, obviously, the Ducks shed quite a bit of cap. 2 very different players. Devin Shore is certainly more defensive. Former UMaine Black Bear, though, I'll point that out. But yeah, Devin Shore, more of the defensive type. Sonny Milano, more of the offensive type. Who fits in better with John Tortorella's system? Devin Shore. And, of course, with all the injuries that the Blue Jackets have continued to have to put up with, not a bad deal. Again, you take on a bit more of a cap hit, but you had the space. So, for the Blue Jackets, solid enough. You get a player who probably fits your system a little bit better. And for Sonny Milano, you get a new opportunity out in Anaheim. Now, again, it is a similar situation where you look at, with Daniel Sprong, it's like, okay, on the pecking order, where are you? Although Sonny Milano, again, he's 23, so, I don't know if you want to consider him a prospect at this point, but he does have that, body of work at the NHL level, 22 points in 55 games a couple of years ago. How will he fit in with Anaheim? Don't know, but another trade where it makes sense, the change of scenery. And then Joel Persson for Angus Redmond and a 7th. Not really surprised. If I'm not mistaken, Redmond was the 7th goaltender that the Ducks had under roster or under contract, so it made sense to move on from him and, pick up somebody else. You give up a 7th in the deal. Potentially, it's a conditional. And Persson, probably an AHLer for you, but still somebody who, if I'm not mistaken, played with the Oilers a little bit this year after coming over from Sweden. He actually didn't. He's only played in the AHL this year. I could have sworn he got called up, but maybe he did not play. Tough to tell. But Overall for the Ducks, I mean, did you do well? Yeah, you did pretty well, all things considered. I mean, again, you had some deals where it's like, okay, change of scenery, moving out from Nick Ritchie and Devin Shore, Daniel Sprong as well. You bring in Milano, Juice, and Heinen. All in all, solid deadline for the Ducks. I mean, again, you didn't get rid of any other heavy hitters. Getzlaf's still there. Henrique is still there. Ricard Raquel is still there. Defensively, your main pieces with Fowler, Lindholm, and Manson are still intact. So, all in all, I mean, again, it's been a very disappointing season for you, but the deadline, it went pretty well for you. I'm not one to hand out a letter grade, but I guess in terms of great, good, okay, and fail, you did okay. You did okay. Solid things, all things considered. The Arizona Coyotes did absolutely nothing. Nothing. No disrespect to Marcus Hannikainen to call you nothing. You picked him up for basically nothing. So kind of nothing. But aside from that, they didn't do anything. And the question is, I mean, again, Hannikainen was just an odd man out in Columbus, so it makes sense. You might get something for him. You might not. But you did Marcus Hannikainen a favor by moving him out because there's no way he was going to play at the NHL level, right? Maybe he will with the Yotes. But you can make the argument with the Coyotes. It's like, okay, you already don't have your first and your third. What more could you really have done to add to this team? Of course, you did your damage earlier in the year by picking up Taylor Hall. Your goaltenders have had some injury concerns. Defensively, I mean, right now, Chikrin's hurt, but, you look at the top four. Esterle, Lyubushkin, Ness, not bad. Third pairing guys, the depth options. Should this team have maybe looked to add another piece or two? Probably. Are they necessarily in a position to do so? Not so much. I mean, they do technically have some cap space right now due to LTIR, but there really wasn't much that they were going to be able to do. I mean, at the end of the day, they are, of course, looking and battling for a playoff spot right now. They currently occupy the second wildcard spot, although Winnipeg's a point back with a game in hand. Nashville have 4 games at hand on Arizona. So it's tough to see this team and say, okay, there are clearly some things you could have done. Would it have been a bit too costly to pull the trigger? Maybe. But you didn't do anything. And I mean, you can look at the people next to you and say, well, what did they do? Again, Winnipeg didn't do much. If anything, Nashville really didn't do anything. But, Calgary certainly did. I guess John Chayka feels like, hey, this team is good enough. It's just a matter of whether or not they perform. That could certainly be the case. But in terms of the deadline, I mean, I'm tempted to say, I'm hesitant to say that you did poorly because, yeah, the team is on paper probably good enough to sneak into the playoffs, but you didn't help your chances. So I don't know. For Arizona, it's just kind of a surprised but not surprised that you didn't do anything. I don't know. They're a really weird team to talk about in terms of what they did at the deadline. For the Bruins, of course, we've already talked about it. We talked about the Kasha deal. We talked about the Ritchie for Heinen deal. I think the Bruins get a passing grade, obviously. I mean, again, for everything I talked about with the Kasha deal, with the Ritchie deal as well. Again, save a little bit of money, about 1.3, I believe, is the change technically. So, you save a bit of money. The Torrey Krug contract is coming up. That's going to factor into it. I think the Bruins did incredibly well. And again, if Andre Kasha can stay healthy, that is exactly who they needed for their second line next to DeBrusk and Krejci. I'm feeling great, of course, about the Bruins' chances. Obviously, I mean, right now, I will obviously take joy in that, whether or not it lasts or not, but the Bruins are the top team in the league. And you had a player of the caliber of Andre Kasha. If he stays healthy, he should be good to go. So, very happy with what the Bruins did, at the deadline this year with the 2 deals that they made. Even if the Heinen-Ritchie deal was a little bit of a head-scratcher, I kind of feel bad about not talking about the Yotes a little bit more, but again, there really wasn't anything to talk about. That's all you can really say is like, well, they didn't do anything. Is it going to pay off? Time will tell. Buffalo had an interesting deadline. First and foremost, they bought. You essentially swapped, Evan Rodriguez, Connor Sherry, and a 5th that could become a 4th for Wayne Simmons and Dom Cahoon. The Wayne Simmons deal is shocking in that Simmons had to waive a no movement clause or a no trade clause, and he did so because obviously, I mean, the quote was that he felt like Buffalo had a better chance to make the playoffs. Now, in theory, they're not horrifically out of it. I mean, you're on 66 points. It takes, 10 points to catch up, but you do have 2 games in hand on Columbus. I don't know. I guess Wayne Simmons just wanted the hell away from New Jersey. Change of scenery. The odds of the Buffalo Sabres making the playoffs are incredibly slim. Incredibly slim. And I've had some people be like, well, they've won 6 out of their last 10. Yeah, you better hope you find that form that you had on that ridiculous winning streak last year. Otherwise, you're not making it. So you pick up Wayne Simmons on half salary. You don't have to give up much to do it. But still, just the thought of why are you buying comes to mind. And then you shed a ton of cap space by moving Evan Rodriguez and Connor Sherry to Pittsburgh. Sherry returns to the Penguins for Dominic Cahoon. Now, initially, I liked the deal for the Penguins until, and by the way, for the Simmons deal, good on New Jersey for getting something for him. Initially with this deal, I'm like, oh, cool, who'd the Penguins give up? And then I saw they gave up Dom Cahoon, and I'm like, 37 points last year in a full season with Chicago, 27 points this year. I like him a lot. Now, I guess there are some concerns over his durability, but I was surprised. I mean, Rodriguez, as far as I know, was scratched at times this season. Yeah, he's only played 38 games, so a change of scenery for him is not surprising. Sending Connor Sherry back to Pittsburgh was. So I don't know if that was, if it was just a cap thing for Pittsburgh, but it's funny because Jim Rutherford, after a previous deal, was like, oh yeah, we're not done yet. And I guess he wasn't. So for Buffalo, I mean, Dom Cahoon, we still got to kind of see what he turns into. For Pittsburgh in that particular deal, again, much like Columbus dealing with injury trouble for the majority of this season, it makes sense to go out and get a little bit of help. And of course, they could afford it. So I like the deal for both. It has the potential to be more beneficial, I would say, for Pittsburgh short term. Obviously they're looking to win a cup this year, next year as well, really until the Malkin and Crosby windows close. And again, we talked about that in a prior video as far as, what Jim Rutherford's given up to make this team overly competitive now. It's all about the now for Pittsburgh. So it's a good deal for them. It's a decent deal for the Sabres. Again, I don't get the point of acquiring Wayne Simmons because, let's face it, you probably should have sold. I mean, you brought in Frolik earlier this year. I mean, I don't know what you could have gotten for the majority of these players. I mean, obviously the Risto rumors have never gone away, but bottom line, another very disappointing season for the Sabres. Again, I don't see them making the playoffs. They're kind of in that weird spot where it's like, okay, you should probably sell, but who do you get rid of? So I'm not calling it a loss for Buffalo, but I mean, it's certainly not a win. Nothing about this season has been a win, from your results on the ice to the way you've treated your alumni. It's been a rough season for the Sabres. The Calgary Flames did some business yesterday, moving around some defensemen. Now, first and foremost, getting Derek Forbort, solid enough. You didn't have to give up much to get him. It was a 4th-round pick. Could go into a 3rd-round pick, but all in all, still not a bad deal for the Kings. Good deal as well. You get another draft pick. Good on you. You look at the Gustafsson trade, though. I don't understand how Eric Gustafsson only goes for a 3rd. Call him a power play specialist. Call him what you want. 60 points last year, 26 points this year. I haven't heard that he's the worst defensive defenseman in the league. When people talk about the worst defenseman in the league, like you hear like Cody Ceci a lot, obviously. I've never heard Eric Gustafsson's name used in that, argument or in that debate. So I don't understand how he only goes for a 3rd. So in my opinion, you kind of look at it and I look at the reaction from Hawks fans and they're just like, what the hell happened? And this isn't the only trade where Hawks fans were asking what the hell happened. I mean, I got to, again, for the Forbort deal, or the Forbort, whatever, solid deal for both. Kings get another draft pick. Flames get a useful defenseman as they continue to try and make the playoffs, and they very much have the ability to do so. This deal is a massive win for Calgary. I'm sorry, but a former 50-point defenseman going for a 3rd-round pick, that's a major win and a major head-scratcher for Chicago. And then they moved Brandon Davidson over to San Jose, which I guess just odd man outs. And, yeah, just a very minor deal, all things considered. But, yeah, you know what? I was confusing Brandon Davidson with somebody else. That's fine. Anyway, case in point, good on Calgary. You picked up some defense, which is never really a bad thing. Again, you are very much, in a playoff spot. It's been an up and down season for the Flames. I mean, there was the controversy. Oh, Johnny Gaudreau, is he getting traded? He just had to pee. But defensively, you look now, Hannafin, Brody, Forsberg, Gustafsson, Anderson, Shillington, Stone, pretty solid. Although, unfortunately, right now, you do have Mark Giordano and Travis Hamonic both out, so that helps. And then Yusuf Alamaki has missed the entire season, which is very unfortunate for a promising young defenseman. So, not surprising at all to see the Flames add on this deadline day. I think they made some really good moves, too. And again, that Gustafsson pickup was incredibly cheap. Oh, baby, the Hurricanes. All right, strap up for this one because it's going to be a long ride. Sip of the beverage. Now, this really started. We do have to point out the deal that was made back on February 18th when they moved Julien Gauthier for Joey Keane. Now, Gauthier was an interesting one. Former first-round pick in 2016. Change of scenery just seemed necessary. He hasn't cracked the NHL lineup at all. He's already played 3 games for the Rangers. Hasn't done much, though. But that was an interesting one at the start. Joey Keane, not expected to be the greatest prospect in the world. 3rd-round pick in 2018. But his stock has skyrocketed over the past year and a half with what he's been doing between the Barrie Colts and now the London Knights. He's also played 2 AHL games this year. So that was an interesting one where the Hurricanes swap, a forward who probably would have been towards the top of their prospect rating, so was starting to slip. You get a defenseman. A lot of Rangers fans not happy about that deal. It's an interesting trade for both. You don't know how it's going to pan out. But it was a sign of things to come with the Hurricanes leveraging their future while they do have a strong, depth in for their prospect pool because they do have a lot of players, and they used players to their advantage in this trade. Now, they acquire Vincent Trocheck. You have to give up Eric Haula, Lucas Wallmark, Chase Priskie, and Eetu Luotstarainen. Now, for the Hurricanes, you get Vincent Trocheck. Now, there are concerns, one of my friends being a Panthers fan, hello Deech, kind of pointing out that Trocheck, suffered a knee injury, I do believe, a couple of years ago or whatever, and it's been interesting, 75 points in 82 games. Since then, 34 points in 55 games, 36 points in 55 games this year. Obviously, right now, he is healthy. He's going to fit in pretty damn well on this Hurricanes team, though. The center depth that they have now between, if you want, Aho, Stahl, Trocheck, Dzingel, Martinook, Martinachus as well. Could play on the 3rd or 4th line. It's a really good setup right now for the Hurricanes. I do like Eric Haula. Similar to Andre Kasha, if he can stay healthy, he's going to fit in well with Florida. Lucas Wallmark has a little bit of NHL experience at this point. He's 24. In terms of how well he's going to fit in with the Panthers, tough to say. I mean, 23 points in 60 games this year. That's not all that bad. 28 points last year. And then they pick up Chase Priskie, who apparently grew up as a Panthers fan. But interesting in that he was one of those defensemen in the Hurricane system where it's like, okay, now you have Priskie and Keane. Does that make Priskie expendable? Apparently it did. And then Eetu Luotstarainen, also not a horrible prospect. 2nd-round pick in 2017, had yet to crack the NHL level. His first year in pro hockey, or at least on North American ice. Of course, he had been playing over for Kalpa last season. So, I gotta be honest, good on the Hurricanes. They're going for it, as the other, deals will show. They're absolutely going for it. They gave up a lot to go for it, though. Again, I like Haula. I like Wallmark, 2 NHL caliber guys. Priskie and Luotstarainen, 2 players with NHL potential as well. The Panthers got a really good haul. It's a little bit surprising because you would kind of expect Florida to still go for it. 2 games at hand, 6 points back of Columbus. They're still very much in the race. And trading Trocheck doesn't necessarily take them out of it. So it's one of those deals where I look at it and I'm like, it has the potential to be a really good trade for both teams. It's so often people want to say, this team won, no, this team won. I think both teams win here. Could be proven wrong, But Carolina gets what they want right now, another strong center that's going to help for a playoff push and, potentially beyond just making the playoffs. And the Panthers, they add to a prospect pool, they shed some cap. And again, Haula and Walmark, 2 NHLers right now. I like the deal for both teams, I got to be honest. The best player in the deal, though, is it Vincent Trocheck? Probably. He and Haula are slightly different, but I mean, I like Haula's 55 points last year. I like his 22 points in 41 games this year. He missed a bit of time due to injury. I don't know. It's a very interesting trade. But then Carolina continued to go off. They acquire Sami Vatanen, 50% retained salary for Frederick Claesson, Yanni Kuokkanen, and a fourth that could become a third. Now, Sami Vatanen is currently injured, as are a couple of other Hurricanes defensemen, but it's an interesting one. Claesson, he's a bit of a journeyman at this point, former Sen, former Ranger, 27, 7th D guy at best for New Jersey, someone who might end up seeing the ice just because of the moves the Devils have made. Yanni Kuokkanen's the interesting one. Again, another former second-round pick in 2016. Got a little bit of time with the Hurricanes. Hasn't scored an NHL point yet. Pretty good point production at the AHL level, though. And again, has the pedigree of being a former first-round pick. Might be able to finally crack the lineup with the Devils. And we talked about it, when the Devils had made trades previously, how the system's a little bit barren for them. It really is. So for the best, I would say, to have, begun to kind of stock up the cupboard just a little bit here. I mean, again, you look at some of these unsigned prospects, like Riley Walsh might end up being something, but there aren't a ton of big names on this list that, Devils fans have to look forward to. And then obviously you talk about getting Jack Hughes this year and how it's been at times. So overall, great deal for the Hurricanes if Sami Vatanen, plays to the best of his abilities once he's healthy. For the Devils, you get rid of someone on an expiring contract. You pick up a roster defenseman. You pick up a prospect who might be something. At least you got something for him, especially considering he's injured right now. So again, I like the deal for both teams. And then Brady Shea also acquired, and it was weird to watch this breakdown in person because, Sami Vatanen, he's going, it started off as, Brady Shea might be going to the Hurricanes. And then out of nowhere, it's like, they traded for Sami Vatanen. The Shea deal must be dead. No, they still got Brady Shea too. Pretty ridiculous. For a conditional first, it'll be the lower of either Carolina's picks or Toronto's picks. So a mid-first rounder to, 20s you would expect. I don't think either of those teams are winning the cup, so I'm not going to say it's going to be the 31st pick. But obviously, for the Rangers, good deal. Because, I know 70 points right now, 61 games. You're technically in the playoff hunt like the Panthers are. I talked about it at the beginning of the season. I still don't like the Rangers roster yet. It's promising. They're in such a better spot than they were just a short time ago. They're not there yet. They're not. They're getting there. They're not there yet. You move Brady Shea to the Hurricanes. You get a first-round pick out of the deal. Damn good bit of business on their part. And again, now for the Hurricanes, you're going for it for sure, which is a nice move to make. However, while the defense looks good, obviously you are without Dougie Hamilton. Actually, Brett Pesce's off the injured list, but Slavin, Shea, Gardner, Pesce, and then Edmondson, who you acquired earlier this year, TVR and Fleury are still there. That's all well and good. I don't have faith in that goalie situation, and there was obviously a goaltender who moved this deadline day that I think would have helped this team a lot. Maybe that first-round pick, or maybe knowing for how cheap he went, looks like he would have been easily, acquirable. I don't like the Hurricanes' chances still because of that goaltending. I don't. So for me, while I can see what they've done, you add Vincent Trocheck, you add Shea, and you add Shea and Sami Vatanen. I can't call it a win. I simply cannot. There was a goalie out there, Robin Lehner, that you could have picked up, and you didn't. Is that going to come back to haunt you? And maybe not. I can't help but think that it will. So I can't call this deadline day, or this deadline time frame, a loss for the Hurricanes. You look at the talent that they've brought in. It's impossible to call it a loss. But I don't think I can call it a win right now either, when there was a goalie that you could have gone out to get at a fairly cheap number. And that brings us to the Chicago Blackhawks, who again, we talked about we talked about that pick for Gustafsson and how I view that as a loss. I think basically every Blackhawks fan is viewing this as a loss. They have moved on from Robin Lehner, which doesn't make sense at all. It just doesn't. Now, again, when the Hawks signed Robin Lehner, it looked like guaranteed, Corey Crawford's time is about done. Lehner's the next guy. And now instead, you move on from Lehner and only walk away with a second-round pick, a defenseman in Slava Demine, and Malcolm Subban. It's not good. You look at these top two trades, it's not good. And again, Malcolm Subban, it's an interesting one because, of course, he was a former Bruins pick, but no. Just, it's been, sure, first year in Vegas, pretty good. Since then, no. I mean, he is not the answer to Corey Crawford, so that means you're planning on having Crawford stay around, but I hate to say it, that dude's one concussion away from, it's like, already you could have the argument of, please stop playing hockey, we're concerned for your health. That's, of course, just as a fan, and, what right as fans do you have to say that about a player? If the doctors say they're good to go and can play, and they want to play, then let them go. But Corey Crawford has nothing else left to prove. How much longer is he going to play? Who knows? Robin Lehner could have been the guy. Slava Demine is, who the hell knows, 2018 fourth-round pick, so what's his ceiling? And you get a second-round pick from Pittsburgh. I mean, cool, you get a draft pick. Now you actually have a second because you dealt your own second away in reacquiring Andrew Shaw. Okay. The Leafs got involved in terms of retaining some salary. They get a fifth-round pick back as a result. That's just more the Leafs doing Leafs things in terms of, working with the cap. So the Golden Knights get Robin Lehner on $1.4 million for the rest of the year. They also get the rights to Martin Dzurkals, who was in the KHL, not currently under contract, or actually not in the KHL. He was in the KHL last year, He's in Liga this year. And I mean, is he ever going to be a thing at the NHL level? Probably not. So, you look at the deal for Chicago, it's not good. It's not good. Who would you rather have? Malcolm Subban, a former fourth-round pick of a defenseman, and a second-round pick, or the guy who could be replacing Corey Crawford? Again, there's a reason why a lot of Hawks fans were pissed off yesterday and pissed off today, and it's because of these top two trades here. For the Leafs, you get a fifth-round pick for nothing, essentially. And then for Vegas, I mean, there have been questions over Marc-Andre Fleury. You now have a tandem of Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner. That, again, shows how serious the Golden Knights are about winning. And I mentioned this on Twitter last week, and, it's a common thought. How interesting has it been to see the Golden Knights and how they've progressed through this? Because we all thought, especially, with the expansion draft, that, they're gonna have this stockpile and Nick Suzuki and Cody Glass and Eric Brandstrom, and they're gonna slowly build up. And instead, no, and mainly because the Florida Panthers handed them 2/3 of a top line, they're like, fuck that, we're going for it. And thus they have, and thus they continue to do. So, absolutely going for it this year. So, for Chicago, I'm sorry, that's a failing grade. Good pickup for the Leafs, obviously just getting a pick for nothing, and a very good pickup for Vegas. But focusing again back on Chicago for now, I mean, again, Eric Gustafsson, that's a loss. You reacquire TJ Brennan for Nathan Noel, who's a forward who hasn't exactly done much yet. 2016 fourth-round pick. I mean, that's the definition of just a trade. He's in the ECHL this year. TJ Brennan is, a very good point-producing defenseman at the AHL level, and that's just kind of his game. He's a former Portland Pirate, so I love him, but his defensive game is and always kind of has been. So, all in all for the Hawks, I mean, you're not making the playoffs, so hey, you sold, but you sold for way under market value. So, I mean, you look at these teams. Anaheim, you did well. You sold, you brought in some younger players, good stuff. For Arizona, you stayed the course with your team, that's fine. For the Bruins, you did what you had to do. For Buffalo, it's a head-scratcher. For Calgary, good job. For Carolina, great job. Although, again, the goaltending, you could have fixed that. For Chicago, I mean, they're the first team where I'm just like, what the hell? What the hell was this? What the hell was this? So, I don't know. And, I mean, again, for the Hawks, I mean, right now, on 62 points, you're pretty much out of the playoff race unless you go on a wicked run. 2 wins in your last 10 games, but now you get rid of Robin Lehner. I don't understand. I do not understand. I mean, Crawford is 35. His deal's up at the end of this year. You're going to bring him back? I mean, I'm sorry. Like, Kevin Lankinen's done well in the AHL, but Colin Delia, whatever, he's not the guy. You just let the goalie go. People couldn't believe that you ended up with Robin Lehner, that the Islanders let him go. And then this is the return you get for Robin Lehner. An backup, a who knows 4th round pick in a second. I'll stop beating up on Hawks fans for now, but that's brutal. For the Colorado Avalanche, I mean, a lot of people kind of listed them as losers, so far. I don't know if I necessarily disagree. I mean, you get a great deal on Nemesnikov. A 4th round pick for Nemesnikov is a pretty damn good deal. 25 points this season. Again, after, leaving the Rangers and going to the Sens. That's a fairly good pickup. And again, for the Sens right now, any draft pick is a good draft pick. So I like that deal for both teams. You swap Calle Rosen, who wasn't really playing at all, for Michael Hutchison. And that's it. So, I mean, I can see why people are calling it a loss for the Avalanche. And actually here, let's go over to their team depth chart here to see what they're currently rolling with. Now, obviously, again, Mikko Rantanen was just recently re-injured. But, I mean, 45 points in 57 games for Burakovsky. That was an amazing pickup this past year. Valeri Nichushkin, remembered, had a hockey. So that's been really good for you. I mean, you look at this lineup, the injuries right now are the big factor, though. Rantanen's hurt, Calvert's hurt, Kadri's hurt, Wilson's hurt. So I don't know. I mean, could they have done a little bit more? Could they have gone out and made a bigger, better move? Maybe. I mean, forward-wise, I don't really see who else would have fit. Defensively, I mean, the emergence of Ryan Graves this year has helped a lot. And then obviously Makar and Girard. Makar's probably going to... we won't upset Canucks fans. It's a battle for sure. The defense is solid. And I mean, again, you get Hutchison right now because Grubauer is down, but Francouz has been phenomenal. And I've talked about that on this channel a lot, whether in a video like this or, in NHL franchise mode or just roster editing. It's not too often a strong KHL goalie comes over to the North American ice and does well. Francouz is one of the exceptions to the rule. He's been phenomenal. So Hutchison's not exactly the most ideal backup, but it made sense with Grubauer being down, day-to-day injury, so he might be out for a little bit longer. But, I mean, for Colorado right now, I think the big thing for them, get healthy and keep doing what you're doing. I mean, right now, just behind St. Louis, 3 points back with 2 games at hand. They could easily jump St. Louis, 7 wins in their last 10. I mean, things are looking good for Colorado. So I get the point and the opinion that if you're in the Avalanche's spot, you go out, you make that huge addition that really pushes you over the top. Was that the right move to make? Maybe. Time will tell. But still, the Avalanche are in a good spot, so it's tough to call them losers. Columbus made a move. It's so tough with the Blue Jackets because, again, right now, the biggest issue with you is, you can't stay healthy. You let Marcus Hannikainen go. You flip Shore from Milano. Of course, we already talked about that deal. So similar to Arizona, where it's like, okay, could you have made a move? Sure. Unlike Arizona, more like Colorado, it's just, for the love of God, can you guys get healthy? If you get healthy, there's still a good chance that you make it into the postseason. You're in a wild card spot right now, although you have 2 wins in your last 10 games, which, probably to be expected with the amount of injuries there. But again, you look at Merzlikins and what he's done this year. Korpisalo also, he's been fine, if I'm not mistaken. But, I think, again, could the Blue Jackets have done something? Sure. The biggest issue, though, is that they just can't stay healthy. And I guess they did do something. Sure, they did something. They picked up Devin. Sure. That was horrible. For the Blue Jackets, certainly could have been worse. Could have been better, perhaps. But right now, it's just, for the love of God, can you guys catch, a break when it comes to injuries? The Dallas Stars have done nothing. They've done nothing. They moved out Emile Juice to the Florida Panthers for a 6th-round pick. Much like the Coyotes, the argument is, could you have done something more? Maybe. I mean, technically, you had the space to do it. And again, if we go back to the team depth chart right now, you look at this forward group, all in all, it's solid. I mean, tough to say who you really could have added and who you'd want to take out of the lineup. Defensively, could you have probably added somebody? I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't know. You see Roman Polak there, and it's like, okay, Stephen Johns and Taylor Fordune are scratched. it might have been nice to add a defenseman. That's the main thing I think of if I'm a Stars fan. I mean, your goaltending is still on point and phenomenal. I mean, Dallas is in a really good spot right now. I mean, third in the Central, just behind Colorado, very much up there in the mix, very much have playoff aspirations, Stanley Cup aspirations. Similar thing where it's like, okay, you could have added, you chose not to. Is that something you're going to regret? Could very well be the case. Tough to call it a loss, but maybe a bit surprising to see that they were as quiet as they were. But, Stephen Johns just recently returned, so maybe they're kind of viewing that as a big pickup for them. The Detroit Red Wings. Now, I mean, there's not too much to say here. You move Mike Green to Edmonton on half salary. You pick up Kyle Brodziak's dead cap. He's on LTIR. You get a fourth, maybe a third from Mike Green. All in all, decent. Decent, all things considered. Mike Green, when he's healthy, is still a pretty efficient point-producing defenseman. It's just, is he gonna be healthy? And then obviously, you look at that, but it's like, okay, he's on Detroit. So, Mike Green on a better team. We'll see what happens and if he can stay healthy. This move, I know a lot of Red Wings fans were upset that, we only got 2 seconds for Athanasiou. But it's still a decent return. I mean, Ryan Kuffner has a tack on. He was an NCAA signing last year. Not exactly setting the world on fire in the AHL. It's been a pretty rough start for him. I mean, the big thing with Athanasiou, of course, that people want to see is him and McDavid on the line so that they can just go. But, Athanasiou's a strong option. I mean, yeah, he's a 50-point guy. Can he go beyond that? Maybe. We don't know. 2 second-round picks is a decent return for the Red Wings. It is. The market was weird this year in terms of what some teams were willing to give up and what others weren't. So I do view that as a solid return. They get Sam Gagner as well, which, I mean, Gagner is an interesting one where he can still put up points, but he struggled to stick around at the NHL level. I mean, he was in the AHL for 43 games last year, 12 points in 36 games for Edmonton this year. Still a capable player, but obviously for Detroit, it's the picks. Now, again, in this deal, Edmonton, you needed winger help, and that wasn't the only help on the wing that you'd get. For Detroit, I think it's a good deal for them too. I do. I mean, again, and if I'm a Red Wings fan, I'm not doubting this man. I'm not doubting that man. There's no way. There's no way. Absolutely no way. Now you have 3 second-round picks this year, 2/3. Things are looking okay. And when you talk about players that you could afford to ship out, there's not that many. I mean, obviously you're not moving Larkin. There's no way you're moving Nielsen or Abdelkader. Probably not even able to move Darren Helm. Filppula's not getting moved. You're probably not moving Glendening. He has some value, but not a ton. There aren't that many players you can look to move, especially on the back end. I mean, who the hell you get? You're going to get someone to take Jonathan Ericsson or an overpriced Trevor Daley or Patrick Nemeth. Not a chance in hell. So, all things considered, Yzerman moved a player that, he could afford to move, picks up some draft picks as a result. I think it's a good deal for both teams. For the Red Wings, you almost want to say, okay, could you have not moved more pieces? But then you look at the pieces they have, and it's like, who the hell were you going to move? So, I think Detroit did pretty well, all things considered. Speaking of doing well, the Edmonton Oilers. Now, we already talked about the Mike Green pickup. Pretty damn good if he can stay healthy. We have talked about the Athanasiou pickup. Pretty damn good as well. They pick up Tyler Ennis for a 5th. Now, again, it might be the former Portland Pirate bias, but I mean, Tyler Ennis quietly, 33-point season in 61 games on a bad Sens team for a 5th-round pick. Great bang for your buck there. And then again, they pick up Redmond in the 7th to move Persson and give him a chance to maybe actually play somewhere, which I'm sure is why he came over from Sweden in the first place. So, for Edmonton, it was a very good deadline. It was a very good deadline. And again, for Ottawa, you could argue, should they have gotten more? It's at least a pick, and we'll talk about Ottawa later. But, yeah, for the Oilers, I mean, the big thing here is that you added some wing depth, and actually, I think the depth chart will better show it. But you had cap space to play with. You still technically have a little bit of space. They're right up to the contract limit now. But you look here at what Cap Friendly has, penciled in right now. But Athanasiou, McDavid, Chason, you talk about what Yamamoto's done. That second line looks phenomenal if that's what they run with. The addition of Ennis, Defensively, Mike Green makes that defense look a lot better. Obviously, right now, Russell's out, Clefbaum's out, James Neal is out. Edmonton, they're in a very interesting spot, second in the Pacific, technically on a better point pace than the Vegas Golden Knights. You need help on the wing, a little bit of help on defense, perhaps. You go out and get that help. Ken Holland did a great job. Ken Holland did a phenomenal job. And yeah, it's very much looking like the Oilers are going to be back in the playoffs. Now, again, I believe in my season prediction video, I didn't predict them to make the playoffs, but that was, before they addressed some of these needs, and then the emergence of Yamamoto, now that they've called him up. I think Edmonton did great. They did great, and that should secure them a spot in the postseason. So, tough to argue. Again, did they get better? Absolutely. The Florida Panthers, did they get better? You got rid of Dennis Mulligan. Again, I know from having a Panthers fan as a friend, he just wasn't a fit with that team. Mason Marchment, we don't know yet. He's a guy who might make it and might be decent at the NHL level. He might not. We don't know. Decent at the AHL level, though. So, all in all, is that a good pickup for the Leafs? Maybe. Right now, it certainly looks like they have the better of the player, the one with more NHL experience, but there were Leafs fans also who are hyping up Mason Marchment as someone who could make the team in the preseason. So, this is going to be the classic thing where some Leaf fans steal, and it's you were hyping up Mason Marchment before. Come on now. So, even trade for both teams. Danick Martel for Anthony Greco. Greco just wasn't going to make it. Again, notable for being fast as hell. Danick Martel, just more of a AHL staple, a little bit undersized, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of the knock against him. Yeah, 5'8", 176 pounds, so a bit undersized. And then, of course, we already talked about the big Trocheck move. I love the deal for both teams, and they also pick up Emil Juice. So, for the Panthers, it's a tough one in that, you're right there in the playoff mix, and, your big move is not necessarily adding, it's a lateral move. Again, you lose Trocheck, but you bring in Holland, Walmart, add some pieces potentially for the future. Is it a sign that the Panthers are kind of thinking, okay, good shot, we're not going to make it this year, let's focus a little bit on next year? I don't know. Or is it just a matter of them having confidence in their team as it stands right now? They've only won 3 of their last 10, 20 games left. They're very much in the mix, but is the team good enough as it stands to make the playoffs? Heading into the season, would have assumed that they could have potentially made it. The lineup's pretty strong. That third line looks tremendous, by the way. Of course, they're also running Noel Acciari up there because he has 19 goals, and Mark Pisic's been playing on the wing. Bobrovsky, you look at that save percentage, he was brutal for the first 2 months of the season. He's been good ever since. Maybe not the Panthers' year, so maybe it is a little bit more on the side of that. I can't call it a loss, but I can't call it a win for them either. The Los Angeles Kings, bottom line is it's a win. It's a win. We'll even look back at the Jack Campbell, Kyle Clifford move. Again, neither of those players really have much value for you. You get a third, potentially a second-round pick as well. And Trevor Moore, who, again, somebody else that has a good shot at cracking your lineup full-time. I actually don't know how well he's done on the team so far. 2 points in 8 games. So, again, decent deal for them, all things considered. You move Tyler Toffoli to the Canucks. You get Tim Schaller, Tyler Madden, a second and a conditional fourth, which, of course, they only get if he resigns. Again, Schaller, bottom 6 option. They put him down through waivers. He cleared, so that makes him eligible for the AHL playoffs. Tyler Madden, a lot of people hyping up Tyler Madden. I'm always a bit hesitant when it comes to undersized NCAA guys who light the league up. Again, I've talked about that a lot, especially when it comes to roster editing. NCAA players, you never quite know what you're going to get. There are some players who can just tear the NCAA up and just cannot make the jump to the pro level. So we'll see what happens with Tyler Madden. The second round pick is nice as well. Both teams did very well in that trade. The Canucks needed to add another winger, especially with Besser being out. Shows that they're going for it. And the Kings get, a pick and a prospect who could be something. Really good trade for them. You get 2 second-round picks for Alec Martinez. Really good trade for them. The Golden Knights are hoping that there's still a little bit more gas in the tank than what it appeared to be, as a lot of Kings fans were saying, okay, he's kind of gone downhill. For the Golden Knights, though, you needed another defenseman. An experienced defenseman's a really good ad to get. You're going for it, as we talked about. And the Kings, again, add picks, which is what they're looking for. And we already talked about the forward deal as well. So right now for the LA Kings, in terms of being sellers, you did very well, because look at that stockpile right there. The first 4 rounds over the next 2 years, Rob Blake's done pretty damn well. Now, obviously, the hope is that you wouldn't be on this downslide. Like, you'd still be at the tail end of being competitive. Especially, first year, I believe, of Drew Doughty's new contract. But at the end of the day, a lot of the pieces have fallen off sooner than you expected. Obviously, now Brown and Carter are both 35. Quick is 34, and his game's fallen off of a cliff. So you did really well as sellers. So for Kings fans, obviously right now it's miserable because you're bad. But hey, again, this is what happens. You got 2 cups out of it, right? Where's the complaints? Oh, we suck now. Yeah, but the prospects pool is still okay. Shout out to Gabe Vilardi, Tobias Bjornfot as well. And you're going to continue to add to that prospect pool here over the next couple of seasons. So yeah, it sucks that the current core that you knew and loved has fallen apart. Clifford, Toffoli, Martinez, on the ice for Martinez's winner. It sucks to see, that fall apart, but that's how it goes. For the Minnesota Wild, I mean, again, I think I did talk about the Zucker trade in another video. It's solid for them. Again, Pittsburgh, you need to do that. You're going for it. You get Addison back, who could be decent. You're still trying to rehab Galchenyuk, and you get a first-round pick out of the deal. Very good deal for the Wild. Right now, Galch has 3 points. Chucky has 3 points in 6 games. That's not bad. And for Minnesota, I mean, it might be a little bit surprising that Bill Guerin didn't sell more than he did. The Parise deal to the Islanders fell apart again. Can't help but think that's because Lou Lamoriello put the kibosh on it once the details of it potentially happening got leaked. But I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't sell a little bit more. Again, I thought that the Wild had a shot at making the playoffs this year. I mean, right now they're only 5 points out of it, which is shocking. So maybe that's the reason why they held on. I mean, but there were rumors about Dumba being moved. And again, I still really like that top 4. That defense core in general is solid. I mean, Dubnyk and Stalock have been a part of the big issue because the Bruce Boudreau system, and again, we talked about this in that video, it's a really solid defensive system. These two didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And obviously Boudreau was on borrowed time anyway because Bill Guerin's not the one who hired Bruce Boudreau. It's just typically how it works. Could they still sneak into the playoffs? Maybe. Am I surprised that they didn't sell? Maybe a little bit. But, I'm also, of course, not surprised that they didn't buy. So, a bit of a weird situation in Minnesota right now where it's like, okay, you're in this neutral ground. Which way are you actually trending? And I don't think we know right now. But all in all, I mean, the deadline, they didn't do anything on the actual day. But deadline season, I mean, they got a good return for Zucker. So, Montreal, another team where it's like, okay, what the hell are you going to do now that we're around the deadline? And of course, we start off with the fact that, they flipped Marco Scandella for essentially they gained a free second. I criticize Marc Bergevin a lot because I genuinely do think the team that he had built a couple of years ago was good enough to win. He just needed to make 1 or 2 more really shrewd moves to win with that team, and he couldn't do it, and then he blew it up. Yes, now in the aftermath, he has fixed his own mess incredibly well. The Suzuki pickup, certain draft picks, and deals like this. So I don't give him that much credit for fixing his own mess, but he's done a good job, a great job in terms of fixing it. Again, good deal for the Blues to get another defenseman. Great return from Montreal. Minor trade here, nothing really to say, although apparently with Veroni and Barber, there were issues with the minor league head coach, so that's kind of weird. They flipped Kovalchuk for a third. Now, apparently they could have gotten more back and that the Bruins were interested, but they let Kovalchuk go to where he wanted to, which doesn't surprise me that Kovalchuk didn't want to go to Boston because, number one, the Russian factor on Washington, and secondly, the Bruins could have given him the money that LA did, and we didn't. I say we as a Bruins fan, obviously. And I don't know, maybe he feels spurned by that. I gotta be honest, I love Kovalchuk. Growing up, I'm like, man, I want Kovalchuk to be a Bruin. And Rick Nash actually happened, which is bizarre. But with Kovalchuk, it would have been really cool. It would have been an interesting fit, but once they acquired Kasha, there really wasn't much space. I mean, it still would have been a middle 6 option. It would have been nice. It's a really good pickup for Washington. And good on Montreal to get a third-round pick for someone they got for free. So, very good deal there. You got a fifth-round pick for Nate Thompson. Good deal for the Flyers, again, who are continuing to chip away. I mean, they're in a top 3 spot right now in the Metro. You get veteran presence there. Good on Montreal to get something back. Matthew Pekka to Ottawa. He wasn't playing, so it makes sense. He'll get a better shot with the Sens. They get Lucic in the 7th. It's an okay return. And then Nick Cousins for a 4th. You don't really need Nick Cousins. I mean, you're not making the playoffs. You're 10 points back of Columbus with 18 games left. You're not making it this year. Could they have sold more? Sure. But for what they did, good bit of business from Montreal over the course of this trade deadline season. So I give them credit for that. Nashville. Now, a lot of people thought they might sell more than they did. I mean, they only made 2 moves. Mika Salamaki flipped to Toronto. That's a wash. And then the Holzer for Irwin deal, that's a wash. So it's been a very disappointing season in Nashville. I mean, you're only 2 points out of the playoffs. Again, you have 4 games at hand on Arizona. That team is built to win now. And obviously the talent is already there. And again, I actually like the depth chart view a little bit better to showcase a lot of this. But, I mean, again, like you look at the top 6, there were rumors that Granlund might be dealt, but that team is obviously built to win now. And if their goaltending can figure it out, you're good to go. You're going to be a playoff team. You're going to be fine. The argument over whether or not John Hines was the right hire, that's still certainly debatable. Although, I mean, 6 wins in your last 10, results speak to themselves. I think it was the right time to move on from Laviolette when they did. But, yeah, they didn't buy. They didn't really sell. Stay in the course. Sometimes it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't. For the New Jersey Devils, obviously this year has been tremendously disappointing. Tremendously disappointing. You thought you were going to be contenders, at the very least a playoff team, and it has fallen apart. Be quiet, phone. There's not really too much you can say. Obviously, when the Taylor Hall deal happened, you knew. You got a great return for Andy Green. David Quenneville, we talked about it. Probably not going to be much, but you got a 2nd-round pick for Andy Green. You get Nolan Foote in a 1st for Blake Coleman, which again, Nolan Foote now, your top offensive product or prospect. Again, Blake Coleman, good bang for the buck for Tampa. But at the end of the day, for New Jersey, really good return there. You get a 5th that could be a 4th for Wayne Simmons. Good return. You had a goalie swap. That's really nothing. And then again, you get a decent return for Sami Vatanen, who definitely wasn't coming back. Yanni Kuokkanen being the main piece. So could the Devils have sold a little bit more? Perhaps. But at the end of the day, 3 first-round picks really helps offset, missing the 2nd and 3rd-round pick. Kyle Palmieri sticks around. Good chance he and Gusev might be traded at some point in the next calendar year. It's just a weird time right now to be a Devils fan. And obviously, the big thing moving forward is, can you rehab PK Subban's value? Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with that for the next 2 years. And obviously the goaltending catastrophe. So, very disappointing, obviously, for the New Jersey Devils. They did okay. Could they have sold more? Probably. But it's not a loss. They didn't blow it by not selling more. Did they win the day? No. No, they did not. The New York Islanders. Don't have the biggest history of trading as of late. They did not make a single trade in the calendar year of 2019, which is crazy. Again, Andy Green, a 2nd-round pick. Eric Gustafsson went for a 3rd. Now, is it the Lou Lamoriello factor? Maybe. Eric Gustafsson went for a 3rd. J.G. Pageau, a 1st, 2nd, and a 3rd if the Islanders win the Cup this year. So really, it's a 1st and a 2nd. The Sens did phenomenally well here. Phenomenally well. The Islanders, I talked about it when they acquired Andy Green. They needed more scoring up front. They got it. But they also re-signed Pageau for 6 years at $5 million per. This could go down as a pretty big win. This could go down as a monumental mistake. I like Pageau. He's defensive, first and foremost, so he fits in very well, much like Andy Green does, into that Islanders system. Career year pace, 24 goals is a new career high. But I mean, some of these lower numbers, is that just Senators syndrome? They did make the playoffs that year, made it to the conference final. I don't know. He fits in well with the system. Do I want to see my team give a guy a 6x5 contract? when he has a new career high of over 20 goals for the first time and he's a more defensive guy, that's a contract that really could come back to hurt them. It makes the Barzal situation interesting in terms of how much money they have left to re-sign him. They needed the help, though. Schmaltz and Laredo is an offset. I don't know how this Pajot deal is going to work out for them. Bottom line is, though, for the Islanders, again, it makes sense to go for it. These picks aren't as valuable for you as they are for the Islanders because, again, the goal is to go for it. You're in the first wild card spot right now. You are 1 point behind the Flyers with a game at hand. It makes all the sense in the world to go for it with the position that they are in. So all in all for the Islanders, it's a win. You improved your team. You're going for the playoffs again. But that's a lot to give up and a lot to give J.G. Pajot. For the New York Rangers, we look at these top three trades. Again, we talked about the Keane and Gauthier trade. A lot of Rangers fans upset about the Joey Keane trade, but Gauthier, we'll see. Maybe that's a sign that Elias Anderson is going to be dealt this offseason. You bring in a forward who can kind of replace him. Maybe not in terms of quality. The Berube pickup, which seemed like it was the warning sign to maybe move either Hank or Georgiev, which turns out it wasn't. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think, wasn't a necessary deal to pick up Berube. I don't think so. I mean, again, you have Hartford that could just sign someone to an AHL deal, but that was what it was. The big thing is picking up a first-round pick for Brady Shea, which, again, if you're the Rangers, I mean, you're right there in the mix, but are you likely to make it over your competition? I mean, 8 wins in your last 10. Who am I to say no? But, them trading Brady Shea really is a sign of, okay, we're thinking we might not make it. And again, you look at that defense. I mean, I'm sorry, but a defense with Stahl, Lindgren, Brendan Smith featuring as much as they have, that's not a cup-winning defense. So probably for the best to not make the playoffs. And again, get well soon to Igor Shesterkin, who suffered a fractured rib, I believe, in a car accident. So best of luck to him. Gauthier is actually going to play, or has played for the Rangers already. That's right, the 3 games, no points. So, all in all, decent for the Rangers. You get a first-round pick. You're not going to make the playoffs at this rate. Decent. Middle of the road again for the Rangers. The Ottawa Senators did incredibly well. They really did. I mean, a third-round pick for Dylan DeMello. Could you have gotten more back? Probably. Did you have to trade him in the first place? Probably not, but still, a third's a decent return from what we've seen in this market. You acquired Lucic, who you then ended up flipping, so, I mean, that's kind of a nothing deal. 4th for Nemesnikov, kind of on the low end, but hey, you got something for him. Great return for Pajot. You pick up Matthew Pekka, and you get a 5th-round pick for Ennis. Maybe tremendous isn't the word to use, but again, when you look at the Ottawa Senators, the big thing here is that when they traded Erik Karlsson, everyone thought, this team is done. Move them. For the love of God, just move them. Fold it. And obviously with what's gone on in San Jose and how they've played certain other deals, I mean, the term war chest for this upcoming draft is an understatement. It really, really is. And then again, you talk about who they have in the system as it is. I mean, again, Norris, Brown, Gruden. I mean, the forwards, Batherson, Abramov. Obviously, Brandstrom's on defense. Lassie Thompson, who they picked up in this last draft. Reserve list-wise, Bernard Docker, they haven't even signed yet. They're looking pretty damn good. And this is one hell of a draft to have high draft picks in, especially San Jose's first. So I can't hate on the Ottawa Senators. I mean, the deadline itself, did they kill it? Maybe not, but it's still looking pretty damn good for Ottawa, all things considered. I'll open that tab back up here. The Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, again, Grant and Thompson, good cheap pickups. I'm a little bit surprised you didn't do more. You're right in the mix for the playoffs. Have a good shot at making it. I'm a little bit surprised that the Flyers didn't do more. Obviously, selling wasn't really a factor, but yeah, they didn't add. I mean, maybe, again, they felt like they didn't have to, and they might not be incorrect on that front. They are still dealing with injuries. Obviously, Nolan Patrick hasn't played. Oscar Lindblom get well soon. Sam Morin has missed the entire year. His career might even be over at this rate. Gostisbehere being a scratch, obviously major trade bait. Surprised maybe they didn't move him. At the end of the day, they're in a good spot. Just surprising that they didn't do anything. So is it a loss? It's drifting more towards a loss than a win, but it's still probably middle ground for them as well. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who again we talked about a little bit earlier. Flashback to the beginning of February with the Zucker trade. Great deal. Minor trade there. They acquire Patrick Marleau for a third, which could become a second if they win the Cup. Very interesting deal. Again, Marleau grew up as a Penguins fan. Why did he grow up? He's from Saskatchewan. Yager and Mario, man. How else would anybody else who grew up when he did become a fan of the Penguins? You got to realize, again, he was, what, 10, 11, 12, 13 when the Penguins are dominating? Of course, he was a Penguins fan. And at the end of the day, too, again, good deal for the Sharks to pick up a draft pick. Gives Marleau a chance to maybe win. We'll talk more about the Sharks in a bit. And then again, you pick up Rodriguez and Sherry for Dom Cahoon. I mean, it's been a phenomenal season for the Penguins. It really has been, just for their ability to hold on, after suffering so many injuries. Crosby, of course, has only played 33 games. And yeah, second team in the Metro right now, neck and neck in terms of point pace with the Capitals. For a team that looked dead in the water, absolutely dead in the water after getting swept by the Islanders last year, it's looking all right. I mean, you do have injuries. Gensel's out for the year. You need Brian Dumoulin to come back. John Marino going down when he did wasn't great. But we talked about it in that Zucker trade video. Jack Johnson hasn't been horrific. The emergence of Marcus Pettersson's been incredibly helpful. And Tristan Jarry deciding to prove to be a number one goaltender helps a lot too. So it's looking pretty damn good for Pittsburgh right now. Again, the addition of Marleau, Rodriguez, and Sherry. You add Zucker as well, and only lose Cahoon and Galchenyuk off of your roster. It's looking really good for the Penguins. I got to give it a thumbs up on that one. Then we get to the San Jose Sharks, which the Sharks in their infancy had some brutal seasons. This might be the worst season in San Jose Sharks franchise history. Not in terms of win-loss record, but expectations and where you are. And I don't have to tell any Sharks fan that. But, you move Brendan Dillon, you get a second and a third, conditional third rounder. It's a third round pick regardless. Good return for Dillon. You get a pick from Marleau. You somehow get a fucking first for Barclay Goodrow. Which, I mean, damn, you had to give up a third round pick, too, that you got from Philly, I believe, in the Justin Braun trade. But all in all, San Jose did well at the deadline. But obviously, getting a first round pick this year isn't going to help you, feel that much better about this season. Obviously, the shocking thing here, aside from a first round pick for Goodrow, is that you didn't trade Joe Thornton. There was the Boston rumor for a little bit of time. There was a Dallas rumor. I mean, what can you say about this season for San Jose? You did okay at the deadline. You got some assets when you needed to. I wish they had dealt Thornton to a contender, though, because this might very well be the last run for Joe Thornton. St. Louis Blues, I mean, outside of Marco Scandella, you didn't do anything. Did you have to do anything? Not necessarily. I mean, again, you added Justin Falk this past offseason, which I feel like everybody forgets. Tarasenko, I don't quite remember when he went down hurt, but, him being down, and obviously Jay Bouwmeester being down as well. But, you're set up incredibly well. Could the Blues retain? Yeah. They didn't really have to do much, did they? So, solid deadline. You only made one deal. Solid deadline. Give it a thumbs up. Thumbs in the middle at the worst. The Tampa Bay Lightning are absolutely going for it. Again, we talked about it in the Blake Coleman trade. All the sense in the world for what he provides. You give up essentially 2 first-round picks. Nolan Foote, first-round pick in this past year's draft. But again, that does not mean as much to the Lightning as this does in terms of helping them potentially win a cup this year. So obviously, you leverage the future. Really good return for the Devils, but obviously great for the Lightning as well. Minor league swap. Obviously, Greco was just sent to the Sharks, in this deal here. And again, I mean, this first round pick as well, it doesn't mean as much to Tampa as it does picking up Barclay Goodrow, who, 24 points, more defensive, cheap option as well. It's just all about depth for the Lightning right now in terms of, hey, we're going for it. And then obviously, you just look at the additions to this team since they, collapsed against Columbus, but you add Coleman, you add Goodrow, Patrick Maroon on a very cheap contract, Shattenkirk and Bogosian on a very cheap contract with Ryan McDonough currently out week to week. It was a great deadline for Tampa, which is bad news for everybody else. Everybody else. The Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm wearing this, right? I'm wearing this. I have this. So obviously my opinion will only be taken with a grain of salt at best. Picking up Jack Campbell and Kyle Clifford, good move. He gave up a bit to do it. Still a good move, though. Good deal for both teams. Mulligan, it's okay. Verano, it's, whatever. Salomaki, whatever. Rosen, whatever. Laredo, whatever. Being involved in this, whatever. The big thing here is that they are sticking with this team to steal a line from everybody that lost to a 42-year-old Zamboni driver. And obviously I didn't make a video in the aftermath of that because what the hell do you want me to say? I'm not sitting here dancing on what could be the Leafs' grave because Jesus Christ. Look, and again, we've had this conversation a lot, especially on Twitch almost every night. There is a certain section of Leafs Nation that certainly opens themselves up to be a punching bag. And then they ask, why am I the punching bag? It's because there is no normal with you. Everything is at one end of the spectrum. It's about extremes, which is why you see the media cover the Leafs the way they do to such an extreme, because they know it's going to get engagement. They know it's going to get a reaction. And that's really summed up this Leafs season is obviously, I don't blame any Leafs fans for being hopeful heading into this season. And then, I imagine it's incredibly frustrating to watch this team be what it's been and to just, not be able to go online without getting dunked on. I understand it's going to be frustrating. Obviously, it's been that kind of season. I have no desire to repeatedly dunk on the Leafs. I mean, Jesus Christ, this last game has to be the most embarrassing loss in your franchise's history. I previously thought my team could hold that banner and wave it proudly. Not anymore. That belongs to Carolina. But, I don't know if it's just because I've been watching Steve Dangle for almost a decade now. I've been following the LFRs for 9 years. A friend of mine and I found it in high school, and big fan. A lot of people aren't a big fan of Dangle, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, when you talk about this deadline, is this team good enough on its own? Has been the question. And I mean, right now, technically, they're in a playoff spot. But if you look at point percentages, and Hockey Reference is a great place to do this. But if you look at point percentage in the Eastern Conference, can I look at, on this page, Eastern Conference, please. Please, Eastern Conference? Okay, it just brings me down to that. There we go. This is what we were looking for. And no, it's not. Whatever. Point percentage in the Eastern Conference, right? If it wasn't for this playoff format, the Leafs have a worse point percentage than New York, Columbus, Carolina, Philadelphia. I mean, again, if this is based off of point percentage, you have the second wild card spot at best. I mean, actually, you don't. Technically, you'd be out of the playoffs. You're the 10th team in the East. It's been just such an incredibly disappointing season, obviously. You re-signed Jake Muzzin. That's great. Obviously, you're dealing with some injuries. Janssen, Mikheyev, Riley. I mean, CC, people are more celebrating than anything. In terms of the deadline, should you have sold? Mainly with Tyson Barrie. Should you have bought? I mean, you did with Clifford and Campbell. I don't know. I mean, I talked about it with Vegas in terms of looking back at what they've been. Looking back at this time with the Leafs is going to be very interesting, especially depending on what happens in the next few years. Do they make the playoffs this year? I can't help but think yes. I mean, I don't exactly. I mean, you're on 72 points. Again, think about how far down you'd be. I don't know if the Panthers are going to jump you. I mean, again, I think Buffalo and Montreal are too far out. So really we're just talking about, are you going to be jumped by the Florida Panthers? I don't know. It's between Toronto and Florida for that third spot, and then the winner gets to play Boston or Tampa. I mean, it's not a good outlook right now whatsoever. As far as what they did at the deadline, did they improve their team? They did, mainly with this trade here. I don't think anything else they did closer to the deadline is a big step up. It's Kyle Dubas putting faith in his team. Is that the right move or the wrong move? We're going to find out. But, yeah, the reaction is going to continue to be interesting. For Vancouver, we pretty much already talked about the Tyler Toffoli deal is a really good pickup. And, you know, Louis Domingue, a bit more NHL experience than Zay McIntyre. So, all in all, pretty good for the Canucks. Again, the argument of could they have done more? Should they have done more? You know, that debate can certainly be had. Currently third in the Pacific. I mean, in terms of the space, they technically did have the space to make a move. Just again, whether or not they should have done it is the question. And taking a look, I mean, at this here, you are dealing with injuries, of course, to Besser, Levo, and Ferland, who's definitely out for the year. So forward-wise, maybe didn't make that much sense to add. Defensively, I mean, Jordy Ben's already a scratch. I probably would have liked to have seen them get another defenseman. I mean, no disrespect to Oscar Fantenberg, but another defenseman probably would have been pretty helpful. But are they on pace to make the playoffs? Yes. Is their team better because of Tyler Toffoli? Yes. So it's not a loss. Debatable as to whether or not it was a win, though, because they could have done more. For the Vegas goal, and to respond to them beating the shit out of the Bruins, was I upset about it? Not really. Oh, you're just lying. No, I really wasn't. They played Calgary the night before. They won that game. And then they go to Vancouver on the road, end of a Western road trip against a really good Canucks team, and that Canucks team kicked the shit out of them. That's kind of what I expected, to be honest. So if anything, that's just giving more credit to the Canucks. It's not taken away from them by being like, well, the Bruins are tired. No, the Canucks are a really good team. And if you can't be at 100% against a really good team, it takes a hell of a lot of effort to win that game. And the Bruins didn't have it. So, just to answer that. The Vegas Golden Knights, I mean, again, the Martinez trade, you had to give up quite a bit, but worth it for you. You move Cody Eakin to clear up cap space, worth it. You get Nick Cousins for a fourth, worth it. And then you get Robin Lehner. I mean, again, Vegas is going for it. They absolutely get a thumbs up here. I mean, again, forward-wise for me, I don't know. I mean, right now, cap-friendly doesn't even have who they're projected to have in on their third line. The bottom six in a way kind of worries me a little bit. The defense is certainly looking better. Merrill and Engelland have been scratched. White Cloud's been playing. But again, Fleury had a 906, and then you add Robin Lehner. Alex Tuch's been hurt too, week to week. So I don't hate the Vegas setup right now. And again, you did what you had to do at the deadline. You added Robin frickin' Lehner. Obviously, it's a win. Washington. We start off with the Brendan Dillon pickup, which again, really good for them. Don't have to give up too much to get it, but it was a good return for the Sharks. You get Kovalchuk for a third, and then the Sprong and Juice swap we talked about earlier. So again, it's a win for Washington. You're the top team in the Metro. You're absolutely a true Cup contender this year. Forward-wise, really adding Kovalchuk was all you had to do. Defensively, of course, you added Gudas at the beginning of the year. Now the addition of Brendan Dillon, and of course, John Carlson is on pace for a Norris again this year. He very well could be. The emergence of Ilya Samsonov, while Braden Holtby continues to just look like he's done. So it's been a very good season for you guys, and I fully expect the Capitals to absolutely be in the running. So as far as what they did on the deadline, the window in terms of adding Dillon and Kovalchuk, really good bit of business. And that brings us to the Winnipeg Jets, who didn't do much. They acquired Dylan DeMello and Cody Eakin, which is pretty good. I mean, right now the big thing with them is that, again, quietly they're being destroyed by injuries. Brian Little is done for the year. So adding a defenseman, adding a forward is nice. Obviously the big thing was Dustin Byfuglien. No surprise, he's sitting out the entire season. His career is probably done. But at the end of the day, you still have Connor Hellebuck, who is phenomenal. That defense core, in theory, is not tremendous. But, it's hanging in there. Forward-wise, they have a good bit of depth. So, I mean, for the Jets right now, 69 points, very nice. 1 point behind Arizona. Did they help their chances a ton? Not necessarily, but I still think, you know, the additions that they made, solid. Could they be a playoff team? Yeah. Will they be? Tough to say, because obviously the Western Conference is a hell of a lot more competitive than the Eastern Conference, at least in my humble opinion. That will do it for this one. Thank you for joining me on what has been one hell of a journey. I think when I started recording this video, I didn't realize what an undertaking this was going to be. But I wanted to talk about every team, and I did. So if you made it to this point, or just skipped ahead to be like, oh, what do you say about my team? Hey, regardless, I thank you very much for watching and checking out the video. It has been something. Franchise Mode stuff will be back on Wednesday, by the way. Let me know what you thought of this deadline day. How did your favorite team do? Your winners and losers? Or are you a bit more like me in terms of just like, yeah, there's a lot of middle-of-the-road teams who did pretty well, but didn't steal the day or didn't completely blow it. I mean, again, overall, you already heard my opinion on every team. Like I said, the team that stands out to me, that's like Chicago. Just what the hell? What the hell, Chicago? What the hell? Well, again, thank you very much for watching. Check out everything in the description if you have not already done so. And of course, yeah, like and subscribe too. Shout out to my wonderful people over on Patreon. I love each and every one of you. And I will see you guys next time.